During the 1920s, the economy was booming. It looked like it would never end. Then the 1920s came to an end, and so did the economy. One of the reasons was because the stock market collapsed in 1929. That's what we're going to take a look at today on Mr. E's Classroom. Hey everybody, Mr. E here. Today we're going to take a look at the stock market crash of 1929. Specifically, we're going to try to figure out why the stock market collapsed and what was the result of that collapse. Grab your pencil and paper, get ready to take some notes. Hopefully when this video is over, you'll have an answer for that question. Most historians agree that there are four causes to the collapse of the stock market in 1929. The first one being speculating on stocks. Number two was buying too many stocks on margin. Number three was ultimately the falling stock prices. And the last one, number four, was the loss of confidence in the market itself. So let's take a look at those four causes a little more in depth. The first major cause of the stock market collapse was speculation. Speculation is nothing more than gambling. People were gambling on the stock market. They would get some hot tip that a stock was going to do well, so they'd try to buy as much of that stock as they could. It almost became like a contagious disease, especially to some of the middle and lower income classes. They saw this as a prime way to be able to get rich quick. Unfortunately, like with any form of gambling, the chances of that hot tip actually paying off are generally pretty small. But it wasn't just people, individuals, that were doing this. Companies began speculating on the stock market as well. A lot of companies would take the profits they'd earned and they would, instead of investing in themselves, expanding their companies, paying their workers a little bit better, developing new products, they would start to pour those profits into stocks, into other companies, because they thought this was a way to make a lot of quick cash. Turns out, that's not a great way to run a business. Cause number two was buying stock on margin. When you buy stock on margin, essentially you're purchasing stocks on credit. The idea is you put down a small down payment, then you borrow the rest and you plan on paying the rest back as your stock makes profit. Buying on margin was how most middle and lower income people bought stocks. That was the only way they could afford to do that. Here's a great chart that kind of explains how buying on margin works. Say you wanted to get $1,000 worth of stock. You don't have $1,000. You do have $100. So you put down your $100 as a down payment and you borrow $900 from some sort of stock broker. Well, as long as your stock makes profit, say the value of your stock goes from $1,000 to $1,500, you have enough money in that profit to pay back the person you borrowed money from. All's good, you get to stash $500 in your pocket. But what if that stock loses value? Instead of being worth $1,000, say it goes down and it's only worth $500. Well, even though you can sell that stock and get $500 for it, you still owe your broker $900. You have to come up with another $400 somehow, and it's not going to be from the profits of the stock. This is why buying on margin is so risky, and you really shouldn't do it unless you really know what you're doing. Cause number three was falling stock prices. This really comes to a head on a day that's known as Black Thursday. It's October 24th, 1929. What starts to happen is stock prices in general across the board start to dip a little bit. That's just the nature of the stock market. Sometimes stocks go up, sometimes stocks go down. And on that particular day, it happened to be a down day. People start to sell off their stocks, especially people that have bought those stocks on margin. They start to get a little scared. Uh-oh, I might have to owe somebody a lot of money. So they start to sell off those stocks. What they didn't realize is the more stocks they tried to sell off, the lower that would drive the price. We've talked about this in class a few times. the law of supply and demand. Anytime you have a high supply of something, the price goes way down. That's what starts to happen on Black Thursday. Prices start to go down. After Black Thursday, prices continue to fall, and this is where we start to get into cause number 4. People start to lose confidence in the stock market in general. For the next 4 days after Black Thursday, prices of stocks continually fall until we hit October 29th, 1929. It's known as Black Tuesday. This is the day that historians say the stock market officially crashed in the United States. Prices just absolutely plummeted. Thousands and thousands of people tried to sell stocks, tried to recoup whatever kind of money they could. That just kept driving the prices down. By the end of that day, the stock market had lost $30 billion. That's $30 billion in 1929 dollars, not today dollars. That was a huge sum of money to be lost in a single day. This shattered people's confidence in the stock market altogether. Nobody was willing to buy any of these stocks for sale because they didn't think they would ever see their money back. So what happens after the stock market officially collapses? The short answer is a few months after the stock market collapses, banks start to have some serious issues. A lot of people who had their money saved up in banks started to get really nervous. They would go to those banks and they would try to withdraw all the money that they had. They figured it was safer stuffed under their mattress or crammed in their piggy bank than it was sitting in a bank that might possibly be connected to the stock market. The lack of cash in banks starts to cause them to fail. Over a period of about 1.5 to 2 years, around 11,000 banks close in the United States. There are some states in our country that were left without a single bank open by the time it's all said and done. Millions of people, when these banks start to close, lose everything they had. Unfortunately, back then, when a bank failed, if you weren't one of the fortunate people that got your cash out in time, you were left with absolutely nothing. Here's a fantastic political cartoon of the day that really outlines how a lot of people felt about this. You have this tiny little squirrel that comes up to a guy on a park bench and simply asks, "Hey, why didn't you save some money for the future? You know, when times were good, why didn't you stash it back, kind of like I do with my nuts that I find?" And the guy simply responds, "I did." Unfortunately, like the little tag says, he was the victim of a bank failure. Through no fault of his own, he wound up losing everything that he had. To make things even worse, when banks start to close and go out of business, other businesses start to follow. Businesses rely on banks basically to be able to operate. They have to have a steady way of borrowing money and putting money back, kind of have this cash flow back and forth thing going. And without the banks around, businesses really start to see an impact. A lot of businesses needed to figure out ways to cut costs, so they start laying off workers. People didn't have jobs, they didn't have any income, they couldn't buy stuff, which meant more businesses had to figure out a way to cut costs and lay off more workers. Eventually, this cycle causes a lot of businesses to start closing, and by 1933, America is hit with the largest unemployment rate we've ever seen, at 25%. 1 out of every 4 people is left without a job. I really only have 2 takeaways for you from this video. Number 1, remember the 4 main reasons for the stock market crash: speculation, buying on margin, falling stock prices, and loss of confidence in the market. The second takeaway is remember that the crash really led to bank failures, and bank failures led to business failures. And when businesses fail, things aren't going to be good. There you go, guys, the stock market crash of 1929. Hopefully you got great notes. Be ready for that quiz when it happens in class. And as always, guys, until next time, remember, don't stop learning.